Hi, I'm Bundy,
And I'm Luke.
and you're listening to the Noise Levels podcast. And today we're talking about Luke,
The band Nale.
Nale.
Stiffness collides up in our leave and learn the horrific. Saying different is
Yeah, so that song was Teeth Grinder from the second tape, was it?
Yeah, they did.
And so I just thought I'd start off with a little spiel about why we picked Nale. And So my brother and his mates, they went and seen him at Cranebrook Hall, up around Mount Pleasant, shops there.
Yep.
Yeah, so they brought the tape home and
We're talking mid-90s, probably.
yeah, about that, yeah. And they were raving on about how awesome they were, and they used to go and watch them play all the time, pretty much. So shout out to Trent and Ross if you're listening. But so I used to play that tape, and I thought they were really cool. And so as soon as I told him that we were doing this podcast, one of the first things he said to me was like, "Yeah, you got to do Nale." So I was like, "Yeah, all right, cool." So
it's just also to show this podcast. We've done 2 punk bands. We're not just going to focus on only punk music. So we're looking at all the alternative sort of music around Penrith and focusing on the bands that sort of we remember. And Nale, we had the opportunity, came up to talk to them, and they were very insistent on all 4 of them being interviewed at the same time with us. So we actually had all 4 of them come round to the studio, and when I say studio, I mean Colden's lounge room. And we interviewed all 4 of them together. So the clips that we've pulled out from their interviews are often not just one of them talking. It could be a few of them talking, and we'll do our best to clarify who's speaking in between clips. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see who's talking. But we'll start off with a clip from Shaun, who is the bass player, and talking about how he met Klaus, the guitarist, and this is how the band sort of started, and way back in 1995.
Scott and I went to high school together, and we'd sort of started jamming and messing around in instruments late high school, and with forming a band with some other people from school that aren't part of it now. And I remember putting in some ads out for a guitarist, but the one he replied to, Klaus here, went to Plaza Records back when CD shops were a thing, and found artists that we liked and put little stickers in them with my phone number on it too, and he called up. So that's how we met him. And
it was funny though, just on a side note, because you already had Clary playing guitar, and I remember when I spoke to you, I don't think you weren't too keen. You're like, we've got a guitarist, and then you sort of talked to me for a little bit, and as soon as you found out I was mates with Rob, that was my ticket into the band. Then he was like, the tone changed. He was like, you know Rob, sick. And then they came around, and then they weren't looking for a second guitarist, but that's how they came about me. So
they were a very legendary Western Suburbs or Penrith band, really good band, kind of Alice in Chains meets Faith No More with a bit of other stuff thrown in, and they were just a bit ahead of their time with the way they looked and sounded. So I did call Klaus up to sort of say, "Oh, sorry, we've got someone." Then when he dropped this at the end, I was like, if he knows those guys, he must be pretty good himself. So by association.
Changed when I see them. I still remember that, and I still remember when you and Clary came around to my place in St Clair.
Was it me and Wes or
no? I'm sure it was you and Clary.
So we can see there, Shaun and Klaus talking about how they met, and there was another guy in the band called Clary, Clary played in another band around this time called Creature with Preston, who was the drummer for Klobassi and Endusk after that. So you can sort of see the little elements of the scene that cross over here. So Clary was active in that scene, and he later, I believe, owned Symphonic Sound Studios after Farzan had owned it, and Clary sort of took over those studios for a while. So Clary is probably pretty active in the scene in that way, in a different way. And it's interesting, I didn't know that he was part of Nale in the early days. So that was interesting to hear. And then, so I guess the next step in the Nale story, so we have these guys getting to know each other and forming a band. And we're going to talk about, we've got a clip here of Scott, who is the first Nale drummer, talking about how he joined the band.
I was the first drummer. As Shaun was saying, we just wanted to do music. We all got together, done that. Shaun was the smart kid. I was the dropout.
So Scott, the first drummer of the band, just talking about how he knew them at school, I guess, and describes himself as the dropout. And now we're going to hear from Kenny, who was the second drummer of Nale, but he was involved in the Nale story right from the start as well. So we'll hear from him how he met the band. And then we'll hear from Klaus about their practice sort of routine and how they practiced.
When school finished and I was good friends with him, he's like, come and check out my band. So they used to rehearse in his garage. I remember just that first day of just getting out in the real world, sitting there going, this is amazing. This is so awesome. And then hung around him ever since.
That's where we used to, in his shed on the property, that's where we had to have rehearsals.
Literal garage bands.
Yeah, no, literally in a shed. So we'd like have a little tape deck. We'd record riffs and parts of songs to write. Yeah, we'd finish playing and then it'd go silent. You just hear the dogs in the background, like German shepherds barking and everything in the background. Probably neighbours yelling, "Shut the fuck up!" Because this was at night, and the shed wasn't soundproof. The sound would have travelled heaps. And we would do this 2 or 3 times a week.
So we've got the idea there of them practicing and coming together as a band. And I guess one of the things that I find interesting about the Nale sort of story is, and they touch on this, and you'll hear this in a moment, about the fact that people, when we listen back to this, we go, oh, that's new metal. But at the time, there wasn't really a word for new metal when they started.
Yeah. They were really early on in the, in that sort of genre of music coming out, really. Yeah,
and in the Penrith, Western Sydney area, there weren't any other bands that sounded like that.
No, not at all.
No, not in 1995, 1996 when they first started.
I doubt there was any bands in Australia that sounded like them at that time.
Yeah.
There were bands that come along later on, like Super Heist, and they're probably the biggest one I can think of.
Yeah, and Test Eagles and things like that.
Yeah, Test Eagles,
And Sunk Lotto is another one that comes to my mind.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Australia's metal sort of landscape was still dominated by... I guess either thrashier or death metal sort of bands in the early 90s.
It was probably still like thrash metal was probably still the thing, probably by 1994, 1995.
Yeah. But so we have Nale come in and they're not really part of that metal tradition, but they're not punk either, and they're not grunge or anything like that. So we're just going to hear from Klaus and Shaun talking about their influences, and then a bit from the band talking about that new metal label, which I think is interesting.
For me, at that time, all the usual suspects really, obviously Korn, all the new metal sort of bands, because we're all sort of into modern music, but as well as some old styles as well.
I think there was a focus on that soft loud dynamics of kind of a post-grunge thing. You've got Nirvana or Alice in Chains, where it was a bit more not traditional metal, put it that way. I think we're all of the same opinion. We wanted to distance ourselves a bit from thrash metal and tight jeans, wearing kind of thrash sort of stuff. So you'd had the grunge thing happen. There was that sort of stuff. We introduced a new sort of, aesthetic or style to popular music, and then that morphed into things like Korn, which really took that same dynamic to a greater extreme, and it was just modern and different. And when that first Korn album came out, as well as Deftones, there was nothing else really like that. And obviously it took off worldwide, not enough, but that seemed to me like the logical continuation to what had come before the previous 4 years. But I'll go straight out and say it. We're first in Australia to do it. A lot of other people I remember changing their sound later as the music became more popular, but I can't think of anybody else doing it. I was knew what was happening at the time. Bigger bands adopted the style a bit too.
Even the way they dress.
Even look at Silverchair's second album. What's the I forget what it's called, but they got really
Freak Show.
Yeah, that was like a new metal-y in parts like that. It became just and it still is a music movement that is. You look at the stats on it too. It sold more albums and is still popular today. That kind of, and also the time it was the late '90s. It was right before streaming and digital stuff really taking off, and when bands could cultivate big audiences too. And the reason why they're all coming back now, I mean, Limp Bizkit have just done these reunion shows and they're selling them out, and there's kids that are 15 that think it's amazing. Like there's, and I think it's an immediate sort of music too. I mean, it's who doesn't want to have that, like who doesn't respond to that kind of soft thing that builds up and explodes kind of thing.
So every band has their starting point where they sort of have someone who sort of sees them and goes, "Well, this is something really cool, and I want to help them." And one of the things that the boys from Nale talk about is Wayne Campbell giving them a leg up in the early days. So I just want to introduce that clip now. So this is Shaun and Klaus talking about that.
Wayne Campbell, who I don't know if you know Wayne, but he was great to us. He had a venue in the city called the Happy Shamrock, which is now I think it's called Girls. It's like a strip club or something. But he gave us a lot of big shows early on and was a great supporter and
drummer from
Mortal Sin.
Mortal Sin,
yeah,
that's right.
Legendary guy in the Australian metal scene, and he did a lot of that in terms of getting into the city type of thing. He was good at that too. And he's popped up in my life many times where I worked at a crewing company later. He was the guy there. He was a customer of mine later too. Great guy, but no one's seen him for a long time now.
Yeah, he was a great dude. Like he was someone who I don't think needed to sort of help us out and give us a leg up, but did. You know what I mean? He was always pushing us, always booking us there at the Iron Duke. We went around his place, hung out with him.
And he's one of the more like influential metal characters in the Australian music scene of all time. Like even you talk to the big drummers like the Matt Coffeys from Henry Zanger and that too, they all refer to Wayne Campbell as being the original. They did a metal band in Australia that was contemporary at the time. They're the only one doing that, and that guy deserves a lot of credit. And he helped us a lot too, but it's just sad what's happened.
Yeah, so I remember the first time seeing them was at Channel Cafe.
Yep.
And they had the big set, and I just remember instantly just sitting there thinking, wow, this is fucking unbelievable for, because we were used to,
just plug in
your
play.
punk band.
Yeah. So we used
you
to
just plug in and thrash away pretty much.
Growing up in Penrith and going to see local bands, you'd walk into a place like the Channel Cafe and they just plug in and play, and that was it. Like they might be a bit energetic and they might be a fun performance, but you didn't expect something like Nale, who had a unique sort of stage show.
Yeah, and they actually had a stage show.
Yeah. So I think this is why I still remember Nale all these years after. I only saw Nale play twice.
Yeah.
Channel Cafe, and I think another time in Richmond. And the sort of paper mache flowers and the smoke machine and the samples as well. Like where Wesley the singer would do various effects and things like that with an effects board. It's just that it was a different.
It was really clever, and it was like miles in front of anything that like you'd expect to see that from. You'd think they were direct from LA. That's how good it was, and like for a bunch of young guys to like come up with all that pretty much on their own, because it was such a new modern genre that no one was doing it. Like, it was pretty incredible to think, really. So thinking back at the time,
So this is this next clip is Klaus and Shaun talking about the stage show, and then also explaining a bit about the sampling and how that sort of happened in those early days of using computers on stage. So this is before anyone used a computer on stage, and they just talk about how that was done.
The performance aspect, like the props and stuff, I think that was very much from Shaun and Wes. Like they were always trying to focus on having a live show, like having things that made the show, like not just watching four dudes on stage, so that I think that came heavily from them, from you guys. I thought that was a really cool influence.
And those particular props too came out about randomly. I lived down the road from was it like a health centre or something, and I knew a guy that worked there, and they had this life-size statue and all these flowers, and they were throwing them out, and he goes, "Oh, do you want this like mannequin and these flowers?" okay. So they became part of the show, but there was always trying to introduce a bit of a psychedelic element to it that was visual without just, if it was done today, we'd probably have video screens and all that sort of stuff too. But a bit of a psychedelic element. There was kind of a lot of, how we say, experimentation with substances going on at the time, so that influenced some of that.
Did it ever go wrong with like the smoke and stuff, like venues saying you can't do this in here? Or?
No, only the person operating it, which was my cousin, who was well known for. Geez, I hope he hears this. Don't edit this bit out. But he was really well known for sneaking wine into sports bottle into venues, and his job was to operate the smoke machine. And one night it could be great, the next night he had no clue what was going on. All he had was one button, and he just had to do this, and it was it was a real 50-50 thing. That was just again to add atmosphere, and we had a strobe light too. He was a strobe guy as well. He had two responsibilities. Shit,
that's right.
In there.
Yeah, wasn't you like tape recorder on the TV?
Yeah, it was all tape recorded, and then just putting them into. I mean, then it was that first recording was ADAT, so it was digital tape, and it was that was like late '92. It was not just recording it on cassettes and then getting the engineer to edit them in. So it was pretty lo-fi sort of thing there.
We didn't have much stuff.
And there was some keyboard slash.
We...
On the second EP, there was some keyboard slash stuff, but we found that one in the studio. You guys put that together. Hearing yourself being recorded and coming back for the first time was massive.
Yeah, it was huge. Yeah.
Now you start out and within like a week of starting the band, you can record yourself and you get an idea of it. This was like, oh god, we sound like that, and it was cool, and so that was. Yeah, humongous in, what was it again?
Dulwich
Hill with Jeremy.
That's
right. His surname.
Yeah, I don't remember his last name.
He was a bit of a weird dude, wasn't he?
Yeah. Anyone in the music business industry.
So, we're in the Nale story. We've talked about the first year or so of the band, which is 1995, and them finding their style and the unique stage show that they had, and the lineup sort of formalising around. We've got Shaun on bass, we've got Klaus on guitar, Wesley is the singer, we have Scott on drums, and that's the lineup at that point in time. Clary played guitar briefly at the start before Klaus came in and took over, and so we have a 4-piece metal band. And Kenny's sort of on the wings as their lighting guy, and he eventually becomes their drummer. But not yet. So in this part of the story, we're up to they're recording their first demo, which is a self-titled demo with 5 songs on it, a cassette tape, and we'll just listen to some clips of the band talking. And it was interesting to have, we did have all 4 of the available members here with us. So we had Shaun and Klaus and both drummers Scott and Kenny all here together in the lounge room. It was their first time together in a room for about 20 years, I think they said. So it was interesting to see that and just see these guys reconnect with each other. It was like they'd never sort of been apart, really. Yeah. That band sort of dynamic and the sort of they're joking together and things like that. It was just worth having them all here just to see that, I think. From my standpoint, but we have the first demo, and we'll listen to them talk about this demo that they recorded, and it was recorded at Humongous Studios in Dulwich Hill with a guy I think called Jeremy, but they talk about that in these clips. So let's listen to them talk about the recording process and how the cover was designed as well.
It wasn't a need to be completely. We didn't have a lot of songs, and they were the pick. I think we had probably 8 songs to be honest, and they were the best of the lot, or the ones that we liked. Compilation, I think it was just you had to pay some money to get onto it too, and we submitted, I think it was 2 songs, I think it was, and who knows how far it went, but you do these things for. There was another one I think we did 2 later, but you hope to give you some exposure or that. But that's what that was. I remember at the time thinking, is this a scam? Like, we've got to pay like $100 to get on this.
Did you get a copy of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's on Discogs, so someone else must have a copy of it.
Yeah, I got about 5 of them. But that's how that came about.
Was that the only comp you guys featured on?
There was another one that was similar from, I think, Can't remember. I do have all these things on CD somewhere at home. But similar thing too, where you pay money to go onto it, and it contributes to the production costs and
distribution.
Yeah, and then they send it out to, I guess, radio stations or at the time, that sort of thing. And that was done only about 6 months or 8 months after starting up.
Disco.
We did.
In his bedroom.
Yeah, I don't know if I should admit that. But, yeah, it was just. Yeah, it was just. Yeah.
That's
tomato
right.
sauce as blood. That is tomato sauce, and we're holding the shadow of the hammer. I think we have
that's
Wes
right.
holding the hammer for the shadow. Yeah, it was just something, just a dark image, just to reflect. Yeah, just darkness and mid-20s angst.
Did you like take the doll out and put it on the road and run over it with your car and stuff?
I don't know,
Well,
maybe.
that first, I think you did.
Yeah, maybe. Nothing would
It's
surprise me.
sort of synonymous with a lot of that sort of imagery that's coming out at the time, like the use of, I don't know, like again, it's in line with other things that were happening at the time, but it wasn't like borrowed. It was just kind of at that time that sort of nature of that aesthetic was being a bit more popularised. It seemed, and it was cool.
Yeah, it was another step away from the fresh sort of glam sort of stuff.
Yeah, too, and it also like a move on from some of the grunge sort of stuff too. Like we also just left for the 4 years of the 1990 to 1994 of that.
Yeah.
So the mid 90s were kind of a weird time for music where, and then new metal was the byproduct or this, thing that exploded out of that, and boy bands. But I'm glad we went the way we did. We started as a boy band, yeah. But after so many dance rehearsals at Ken's house, we just went,
There's still time.
You touch up on your moonwalk.
Yeah. The harmonies just weren't working.
Short and beast.
So that last bit there was just them talking about the cover design of that first self-titled demo tape, which I'd never heard until just recently. I've managed to get hold of a copy thanks to a guy whose name is... just looking in my notes now. His name is Stephen Szymanski. Just obviously a fan of Nale who still had the tape, and he was kind enough to digitize that for us, so we have a copy of it again. So here's a song from that first tape. It's called Victim of the Modern Age. The band suggested this being the song that we go with. It's the first song off the tape. It's also a song which featured on a compilation CD in 1996 as well, which is when this first tape came out, called Down Under something Volume 2. You'll see an image of it on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. And so this is that song, Victim of the Modern Age.
And now you, another victim of the modern age, but you can be helped.
don't know how to say it. Just be honest. Sometimes you get a bit too fucked up, and you can't do shit anymore. Not because you don't want to, but it just happens. But yeah.
You know Stephen Adler in Guns N' Roses?
Pretty much, yeah.
A milder version.
I know. It wasn't even on heavy shit. It fucked me up that bad. Because when I got out of the band, I distanced myself for a few years just from music, just to do something different with my life for a while. Yeah, which was good. And after all that happened, I was glad they ended up going with Kenny too.
Yeah, so I was at every practice. They had everything. I was there just watching and watching and watching. Yeah, and then it was. So I think it was one night Scotty had to take off to go home, and it was still mid rehearsal. So his drum kit's still there, and then started to they're like, oh, what do we do? I'm like, I'll have a go. So that's basically, I jumped behind the kit, and I think because I knew them, it wasn't perfect or anything like that straight away, but I think that was how it started, and because I knew the songs.
So he learned how to play the drums. He didn't know how to play them that much, so he kind of had watched him, but he developed his own thing and learnt to do it, and that's sometimes better than getting some guy in that does all their own thing, and you've got to adapt them to your thing or get them to stop doing stuff. It was more someone that knew the songs and they're already one of us kind of thing. And
being, before he was the drummer, he was the lighting man. So he was already kind of drumming with the lights, so knowing the patterns and the changes.
So we just heard from Scott explaining why he left the band. In a nutshell, he said he was too fucked up. It was, as you were saying, Colden, it was pretty refreshing to say how honest they were about it. Yeah. And then Kenny jumped in on the drums as the next drummer, and Kenny was in the band from that point onwards. So this is the middle point of the band. So we've come to the end of 1996, start of 1997. So the band's been around for about 2 years now, and we're just going to hear a little bit more about them working together as a band.
None of us were pros. So, and we all got better just from grinding it out. You know what I mean? That's what we did. We'd rehearse 2 or 3 times a week, every week, without fail. Yeah. And that's why we got better just purely by grinding. None of us were amazing musicians or anything. But we all sort of got better together as a band. Not one of us wasn't a standout kick-ass muser or anything. So we're always very clicky. We always, because we'd hang out as a band all the time, even after rehearsal. We go into your caravan, the caravan at the back. And nothing sus. Just lots of drugs.
And no pants.
There weren't chains and stuff hanging up.
Nothing sus. Just usual band stuff.
I have this philosophy. I think if you're going to start a band, you actually need to be young, 19, 20, because you don't have the responsibilities of or whatever, or, you're also a little bit, I can't use the word naive, but you need to be like that. When you get older, you get a bit more cynical because you know how the machine works. And so when you're that age, it's good you can find people on the same page. You don't have responsibilities. You can be dedicated to something too. And also, it's like that classic thing when you're that age too. It's like a gang kind of thing. That's really, and I've done it later too. It's really hard to do that in your mid-20s, your mid-30s. It's not. It's coordinating people's. I gave up on bands because it became a matter of logistics. It was when are you available? I can't do this. I can't. When you're 19, it was everybody needs to be here. Yep, we're there. And it is age specific, but you're also got this. I don't want to say delusional, but this thing of we can make it. There's no way. I'm not interested in doing anything music because there's no chance in hell you're going to make anything from it. That's my opinion now. But as a 19-year-old and different times too, I mean, I do feel for young people starting a band in this day and age, what's the point in a way? Where are you going to play in Sydney? Even to Sydney, where are you going to play? You're not going to make a living from it. You've got to do it because you love it. There was a chance in the 90s, pre all this stuff, where you could maybe have a career and you had to, that's what drove you kind of thing. But it was age specific, and we're also, really clicky, and we did everything together and that too. The older you get, the harder that is to kind of manage, and I think my worst nightmare now would be someone going, hey, you want to start a band? I was like, fuck no.
So it was really interesting hearing Shaun talking about how he was comparing being in a band to a gang sort of thing. And I kind of resonated with that because, at that time, when I was 18, 19, I thought I was going to be the next Kurt Cobain myself. And it's true, you do get, the older you get, the more cynical you get. But at that age, around 18, 19, you think, you don't think about the cynical things in the world. Everything's great and you're the best.
You think you can do it all, You think you can do it, and it's. Yeah. I think it's having the balls to think that allows people to actually sometimes do it. Yeah, exactly. Some people do manage to do it because they do think they can, and against the odds they succeed. And we've seen this looking at some of these bands in Western Sydney where people have gone on to do some really cool, amazing things. Like when we looked at the Hass Brigade, Ivan performed at the Opera House, and then looking at Spilt Milk and Maddie's had and Damo have both played pretty solidly in a variety of really cool bands over the next 25 years after Spilt Milk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I think you're right there that it has it is interesting hearing about that pack mentality or that gang mentality. And so we've got a clip here where they reflect a little bit more about what was the hardest thing about being in a band back then in the 90s and what it was like fitting in with the scene.
Yeah, and for these guys, they were pretty brave because they could have easily just said, "Oh, well, we'll just." It's easier to be like everybody else, isn't it? And it's harder to be, be yourself. And you got to say that these guys nailed being themselves.
Nailed.
Hardest thing?
I don't know if it was
getting Ken to turn up on time.
Sorry. I was always there.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. It was hard.
We got shows.
It was a time where the drum media. It was print media. You could literally go through that. There were a ton of venues. You could call them up.
Still a lot of venues.
There was a local live scene. I think that's a lot. It's a lot. It's not as there as it was now too. It's become more. When you look at Sydney and the venue thing, there's all the venues that take on bands are kind of a higher level. There's not this grassroots kind of culture.
That's the thing. I've noticed the under 18 scene is just completely dead.
It's dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of work in this field too. I mean, there's kind of the live scene in Sydney particularly has been destroyed by COVID, lockout laws, that stuff too. There's not. So if you're a young band now in Sydney and you're going, where are we going to play? Good luck to you, because there's not that many venues, and then it jumps a level and you're kind of at a bigger one that's hard to crack into as well. But there was, just back on the original thing, it was easier. There was an underground, I hate using that word, but independent band scene happening in every pub, and yes, the internet can allow you greater exposure now, but there was somewhat easier to get shows, to find other bands. We got a lot of shows for other bands.
Your bands would recommend you or something.
Yeah.
We want to play with these guys. Henry Zengar.
Segression was they were big at the time, the biggest metal band in the country.
Naiad.
Yeah.
We played a lot with Naiad. They were really cool dudes, really
good band.
That was for that time too, they were such a pro band, music wise, and the way they ran their band and everything. That was super pro.
Basically
really
any
nice
band that was heavy alternative that wasn't trad metal, there was a little scene that we...
I think anyone metal that was open-minded.
Yeah.
Because bands Segression really they didn't really like us when they first met us, because they were like, who are these guys wearing baggy pants and colours? Where they were still dressed in all black, later
Funny
on,
they changed.
Years down the track, it sort of filtered through to those bands as well. But early on, metal bands were looking at us weird because we had short hair or we wore baggy clothes, skate clothes, because I was a skater. That's where the baggy clothes came from.
And that genre of music had again, if you look at what happened, what grunge did to the 80s hair metal bands, where suddenly overnight, if you looked like one of those guys, you were completely uncool. In a heavier sense, when the new metal thing developed too, that's what happened to the guys in the tight jeans and the vests with all the patches on it, and the that sort of scene of stuff too, that became old. It was just not new anymore, and the new metal thing was influenced not only by hip hop too, but you look at hardcore music too. I mean, they've been guys with shirts and shorts playing heavy music for. It was diversion, and it was kind of at the time we used to throw around the word the crossover bands. That was bands that incorporated a lot of different elements into their
that's
sound.
I think that's why we could play with a lot of different bands.
Yeah,
we had a lot of different influences, so we could sort of slot in. We weren't specifically just one thing.
Yeah.
Through all of us, like I was more the metal guy, and Scotty was a metal guy. You guys brought other influences from punk and from dance music and all sorts of other stuff.
Yeah, and industrial stuff, and just I think also having a creative outlet that allowed you to pick from a broad palette of things, not like these two bands. And that's, I think that was big for us too. If you're getting a look at heavy music in the mid-90s, it was a lot of those, again, trad metal bands, their influences are the same 5 bands for most of them, like Slayer and Megadeth and
we'd play with a heavy band 1 minute and then a pop punk band the next.
Yeah, and I like that too. And pop punk bands or hardcore bands had a completely different scene. Like, usually had bigger and better scenes than what were happening in metal stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's always been known for that. Yeah. So there was a lot more. Back to the original question again about there was a lot more happening then. I think if you started a band, you could get easy access to gigs. What was hard about it, just to that, I don't know, like just recording. I mean, obviously that's why
finances.
Not having that in your pocket.
Finances would have been the hardest thing for us at the time, because we could have done anything if we had the money, but it was money dependent.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it's 1997, and the boys have just recorded a new demo. That which does not kill us.
So we have this demo, which is one that I remember, because that's the one that I picked up from a show, probably that Channel Cafe show that we both talked about.
That's the one that my brother brought back from that show that when he first, because they'd never heard of him, so to them they just turned up there. There's bands on in the youth centre at Cranebrook, and
so it's got a clown on the front of it, and this is part of the iconic sort of memory of Nale that I think a lot of people have, is that the song Circus Boy, which we'll play at the very end of this podcast, with that sort of iconic sort of circus music at the start of it, and just that sort of creepy sort of horror clown sort of motif. And the tape only has 3 songs on it, but they're all great songs. And I have to credit my friend and brother from another mother, Jason Spiller here, who introduced me to Nale. Before I saw them, he was raving about Nale, and he was always jumping onto every new band that came out. I'd always hear about them first from him, and so he said, "Oh, you got to see Nale, you got to see Nale." So then when Nale played at the Channel Cafe, I paid attention because I wanted to see what he was talking about. And so I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, Spilsy was right." But
again, shout out Spilsy.
Shout out to Spilsy, who most people who are from back in this time might remember him from his radio show that he did in the late 90s called Twist and Skank. Here's a clip of the boys from Nale talking about recording their second demo with Russell Pilling.
The 3 best that we had down, and so that was
that we were tightest with and liked. We usually just pick our favourites or the ones we were best at.
And I think there's a philosophy too of like giving people 3 concise good things rather than more like the idea would be to do another 3 later. And I remember selling some of those tapes back then for like $30. Like, you only have 2 left, and some people wanted them. It's like, all right, what do you want to pay? Holding up the paddles.
I'll never forget the feeling of walking in there to do that, because I, like 2 months into just playing, and just can't wait, but then just shitting myself, going, how do you even do this? What's happening? And I ended up sounding. It was a great, like.
Well, you only never need to know how to play your own songs well. You don't need to like be able to play Rush's back catalogue or anything to do it. You just
I'm glad you have. I could do that.
But cost would have been a bit of the factor why we chose that. Russell Pilling had some decent to mid sort of credits, like he was kind of a known guy. I forget who he's worked with now. Again,
I think he did. He worked with Henry Zenger as well. I think.
Yes, that might have been.
I think that's why we might have heard of him as well.
So we went in and it was just one day, I think it was.
I can't even remember
I
that
think
day.
it was a day recording, a day mixing.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of the.
In an era where when you walked out with that mix, that was it. There was no revisions. There was no calling the guy up and saying, "Oh, can you put like?" Because I've worked in that stuff and it does your head in when bands keep wanting things changed. It's unlimited revisions now. It's they all know that you've got the tracks that you can pull up to. There was tape involved, but it was still.
It was a DAT tape, wasn't it?
That was DAT tape. Yeah, ADAT was the first. So the VHS ones were the first one, which I've still got.
And DATs were the small ones.
And DATs were the digital sort of tapes that became, they're not analog, but they were still a tape format. And yeah, when you walked out, what you got was what you got. It's definitely an era where you had to focus on performances and make the most of your time in there. There was no
you couldn't
stuff
edit.
afterwards.
You couldn't edit. Edit the mix later.
I'll tell you something funny about that recording. I got my bass set up at, let's just say, an unnamed shop in Penrith, and the guy fucked up the action, so I had no sustain. So he'd set it up, but he'd done it wrong, but had no time to fix any of that. But it was kind of like trying to make it. It didn't sound as good as it normally would because the action was too low, like it was not resonating properly. But there was no like, I'll come back and do this later. Like, we just had to make the most of it. You don't notice when you listen to it, but I just remember that at the time going. I got this set up to make it better, and he fucked it up.
Yeah, we're here to record now. My bass is fucked.
Yeah. But
Watch out.
be careful. Let's edit this part out. No. He who shall
Remain nameless.
All right, so that's. I just like to clarify. I did not pay $30 for one of those Nale tapes that they spoke about. I'm pretty sure I just paid the regular rate for that cassette tape of 3 songs. It might be worth $10 a song. It probably is now, but I didn't pay that. Here is a clip of the boys talking about some of the shows they remember the most clearly from their time in Nale, because we are getting towards the end of their timeline. We're up to 1998, which is when they break up. And so just thinking back about their shows that they sort of remember the most.
Oh, there's so many.
I remember the one that was with Nitocris.
The showground.
The
which
showground.
was like, we were a local, and I remember a lot of people had shown up for us because we were in that area, and I think we had the biggest crowd of the night. But that was just because we'd done a lot of from that area kind of thing. It was, I don't know what the numbers were, but there were hundreds there. Like, there might have been 1,000 kids there after the whole show.
And there's the ones in Richmond in that.
On the truck.
And the truck in the field, and also the I keep thinking of the one
North Richmond
in the
Youth
hall,
Centre or
in
something.
the community hall. Every time I drive past the we played
all
in.
those.
Yeah.
I remember going to we were just joking about this. We went to Canberra once, and
We
went in the back of the truck, but we all fell asleep straight away and realised later it was minor carbon monoxide poisoning. Like, if we're going 2 hours further, we might not
Did I
be.
drive all the way to Canberra with you in the back of the truck?
Yeah, and we all just fell asleep, and then we woke up and go, why have we got a headache? What?
You both in the back, we're all just like,
Yeah, all these fumes were coming in.
we're playing in half an hour or something.
All memorable shows. I didn't, like, they were all...
That's a good one.
Yeah. Things I remember about our shows too is that we had a sort of an intensity about our execution that doesn't matter what was happening, people would stop and watch. And I always liked that fact. Like, it was kind of, even if they didn't like it, there was something that was going, these guys, these boys mean it. Like,
something would grab you, regardless,
Yeah, there was a bit of that, so even a bit old crowd sort of thing too, or but just that commanding people's attention through the intensity of the performance, not even in the songs, it was, I think, the way we conveyed it. I remember one in a place in the city that was called Club Fuck at the time, which was the Agent Court Hotel.
Yeah, that's right.
That was a very intense show that, let's just say, things were consumed in a 45-minute set was played within 30 minutes. And they were all pretty memorable.
And there was feedback was always memorable.
Yeah.
Feedback was a good one. Iron Duke.
Yeah, the Iron Duke was a pretty healthy scene at the time, that when it was doing, like Deftones played there when they first came to Australia 3 nights in a row. That was happening. Feedback was one where we actually got a case of beer. We didn't have to
got a
pay money. We actually got some shit.
Yeah,
Like,
Feedback was just above the Newtown station.
Yeah,
It was always a very, very hairy load-in.
yeah,
metal stairs that are like 50 degrees,
Yeah.
carrying like massive speaker boxes up there in the wet.
But
But it was an awesome venue, like dark, dingy. I don't know if you ever got to Feedback, but yeah, tiny, small, little, really dark club.
And
That's right.
and also another show. I'm going to throw
You
my
were gonna
cousin
kill
under
him.
the bus here too. But we played one where he passed out drunk, but when he fell back, he pulled the mains power out of the entire thing. And I just remember this guy this sound guy yelling at him, and I knew who he was yelling at. I just didn't know. He's like, "You fucking asshole!" And I was like, "Oh, that's my cousin's blacked out." But his one job of doing the strobe, and the pressure got too much. But there were funny things like that. There was a lot of shows to know people, but the youth shows particularly where it seemed to have a lasting impact in some ways with, which is cool.
All right, so this is now the band reflecting on why they broke up when they did, which is 1998, and the reasons behind that.
I think it's just two kind of wanting to go one way, two wanting to go another, I guess.
Okay.
There was also, I think, that was around the time when you and Wes were you going off to uni as well.
We started that too. Look, basically, it was a bit of the classic musical differences, and I'll just say, being young and lacking the maturity or communication skills to work things. And it's tough being in a tight knit thing. I mean, it's a fact too that you've got sometimes a greater chance of winning the lottery than having a band be successful. It's something, the odds of that sort of stuff, particularly this day and age. But you've been in a tight knit group with people for several years. People change, people do things, and it was just not being able to rationalise some of those things, and the musical differences, and wanting to go a different way, and not knowing how to incorporate all that stuff in. I mean, if we're doing it now, completely different conversation or outcome. But when you're 19, you don't or 20, 21, that sort of stuff. You don't know how to, work that stuff out. That was my kind of thing.
But it didn't actually end. We didn't all hate each other or anything like that.
No.
Like it wasn't like fuck you, this.
Like
that.
I threw a
It was-
guitar at Ken.
Yeah,
That
well,
was about it.
yeah. But when once
That
we
was
get
just for
out,
fun. I didn't
once we
have
get
any-
outside,
No, it wasn't. It was only your G strings.
but as soon as we got back outside, payback, motherfucker.
The one string.
But yeah, nothing was terrible. Like it wasn't ended. Like no one hated each other, but yeah.
I think one thing that happened a bit too, and Scott and I were talking a bit about this last night too, but and it's a common thing you see with any band that, like, in the style we're in, there can be elements of certain things that you like or you don't, and I think I didn't like some of the new metal connotations, so I was trying to, and we're moving more into other things, and you guys like more of a hip hop sort of angle, and then rationalising those sort of things in one band or bring them together can be difficult, or not knowing how to do it.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the things that sort of, I think it kind of made us as a band and also broke us as a band, that we're all four people kind of pulling a little bit in different directions.
Yeah.
So that kind of creates the band, but also you've got to work together to keep it together. Because otherwise, if you start going, oh, no, fuck, I don't want to do what he's doing, then you start going, you start not wanting to do that. You know what I mean? So we're always kind of like that. And that's what made the band, I think, because we all came from a little bit different direction. We sort of had common ground, but then there was other stuff around it that was different.
I think any band that is somewhat interesting at an early stage or whatever has got to have those disparate elements that come together to form like bigger than some of its parts. If everybody wants to do the same thing, you'll end up sounding a bit like the clone of the thing that you're into.
And I think that was part of it. I think what Shaun was saying about the new metal, distancing himself from the new metal thing, was because we weren't, I don't know that we were that new metal, and we weren't even like Korn at all.
No,
but
yeah.
we used to
got
cop
labels,
that
mate,
because
yeah.
we weren't metal,
And
and we were different. And that's why you especially, it used to get to you a lot.
Yeah.
Because we all loved the band, but obviously you don't want to be written off as just a straight up rip off of someone, you know what I mean? So, but we just got called that because that's the only pigeonhole they could find that was.
It was difficult.
It was because we weren't metal. We weren't really.
Yeah, so we just wanted to give the band an opportunity just to explain why Wesley wasn't able to be here at this point. So
Yeah, for this podcast, so when I said the 4 members who could be here with us, obviously that's not going to make sense unless you hear the band talk about that. So here's Klaus and Shaun and Scott and Kenny just sort of talking a little bit about Wesley.
I think Wes being the vocalist, it's like, that's the final piece on the music and everything. So it really directs. Hey?
So first thing everyone's looking at.
Yeah. So I think he had a big impact on the sound, because obviously, if he'd been a metal vocalist, we'd be a different band. But he was very goth influenced, punk.
Always charisma, I found. He'd been a friend from high school of mine for a while, and
unique.
I always remember when he did his sort of audition thing for, which was on the spot singing this song. His voice was okay, but it was the way he got into it, and he didn't give a shit who was watching. And there were the elements that you need in a great frontman, and he had the voice that kind of came later. But again, all I'll say too is he had an unfortunate accident, and he is still with us, but we're not in contact with him anymore. And he's sort of an irreplaceable sort of person as a personality. Like I'm not exaggerating when I say this too. He had a charisma like a Jim Morrison from the Doors or something. There was a thing about him, and it was the main focal point, and he brought a lot to that. But something happened, and he was an incredible frontman. And his voice was developing all the time. His songwriting abilities, his lyrical writing abilities. He was learning keyboards and stuff too, like to learn to play an instrument to contribute musically to the band. But he had some of those intangibles. That's all. It's that you see in the, and whatever he didn't have, he would have had over time. But
So this pretty much brings us to the end of our podcast about Nale. And the final thing that we'll hear from is the band members sort of looking back on their time in Nale and what it meant to them. And they were something special at that time. And the thing that we have in common with these 3 bands that we've looked at so far of this podcast is they all had something to them which made them stand out at the time. They weren't necessarily the biggest bands in the scene at that time, but they were bands that people remember, and they are sort of like keystone bands, which other people look back and go, "Oh, that band was like something different at that time that influenced, or band members went on to do things, or had a style which was ahead of its time."
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely, and they are still remembered today. Like I say, my brother and his friends, they're sort of more into that metal thing. And
metal thing, as in you mean metal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they still talk about them today, and I mean that's pretty impressive, really, considering it's nearly 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's something to be proud of. If I was, the boys should be proud of themselves for having such a big impact on the local scene. Yeah.
So we'll hear from them looking back on their time, and I do want to thank Kenny and Klaus and Scott and Shaun for coming together again to reminisce with us about the band Nale. And then at the end you'll hear their song Circus Boy, and that'll be it for episode 3.
Excellent.
Oh man, I just think back with fond memories. Like I always think, man, I wish I could just go back there, because it was just a good time. Like at that age, no responsibilities. All you're doing, you don't give a shit about your job. You don't give a shit about anything else. You just want to go play music, and it's just fun. You just dive head first into it. It's I think about it all the time and think, man,
the fun we had
good times.
The band, just hanging out with each other.
And that was what we were saying before about how the members are we were more interested about being a group rather than awesome musicians. Like, because we'd always hang out, we'd always be together, even if we weren't playing music or playing a show or whatever. We'd always be hanging out.
Well, I think it's pretty much what defined me as a person. Like, because wouldn't say I had a bad upbringing or anything, but I was always told to shut up, sit in the corner, children should be saying, not heard it. So I was always just, what's going on? Didn't know much about it. But and then when I finished the first day, I saw these guys doing it, I just went, there's a life out here. Wow, it's awesome. And that pretty much made me realise that I could think by myself and meeting awesome people.
Yeah, and so it's very true because other than for the band, like, I would never ever get up on stage. I'm not that dude to be up on stage. So for anyone looking at me, like, and I used to jump around on stage heaps, but that was also part of hiding my nervousness.
Yeah.
Because if I was jumping around, I wouldn't notice the crowd or anything. I'd just get into the music, so I'd be focused on what I'm doing, and that would distract me from being nervous.
Yeah.
It formed a lot of stuff. It built our personalities, kind of thing too. It was great to have a group of friends that you did everything with, and that sort of translated into the music. And I can remember later doing other bands where it was chasing that same sort of feeling and never got it again.
Yeah, I got that.
Whether it be the when you played, the way people reacted to it, or I mean, other bands I did later, sometimes it literally felt like employees clocking in on a job kind of thing. There was never this great chemistry. There was never the reaction of people playing where they went, you could see on their faces, like with the Nale thing, it really did blow people away sometimes. Yeah. Whereas later it was like, didn't. So you're almost chasing that same feeling. That's why I still work in music now too. It's been 20 years almost chasing that same kind of experience, whether it be the sound coming out of the speakers and having, move you and the feeling of it in a live environment, but just that it's defined a lot of my life since then, and I think all of ours, like the things we've chosen. But those 2 or 3 years really kind of made us. It sounds cheesy, but defined who we are a bit today, and it was a great time.
And it's amazing how it feels like it was longer than that.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like such a short
talking
time.
dates. How's it 3 years? It's half my life.
And you think about too, like if we hadn't have done that, like what we would just be like, guys going to like the local pub. Well, like what the fuck would we have done? Like there was focus, there was shared ambition, there was drive, there was this goal or idea that we might get somewhere with it that was exciting, and then there's all this other excess stuff that Klaus said about confidence building, you're meeting people, you're doing all this stuff too. Like, ironically, my job today is not that different to what I do then, which is going through the drum media and ringing up people and making appointments. That's kind of what I have to do now. Like, it's it's just interesting, but like it had a greater impact and benefit outside of the music itself, and kids, I recommend starting a band to anyone.
Yeah.
Don't plan to make any money.
Yeah.